What's going on, everybody? This is Boxingwave, and we are back with another fight breakdown. January 7th, live on Showtime pay-per-view. We're going to have the return of Gervonta Tank Davis, who's going to be facing off against Hector Garcia. Tank Davis is going to be defending his WBA world title at 135, and Hector Garcia is going to be moving up from 130, he's the current WBA, the Super WBA champion, down at 130. He's going to be moving up to face Tank Davis. All right, Hector Garcia has never fought at 135. He's fought mostly as a featherweight throughout his career at 126, and he's moved up to 130 and won a world title up at 130. But before we continue to go on with this breakdown, I just want to remind you guys that tonight on Showtime, we're going to have Frank Martin against Michelle Rivera. Very good clash. If you have nothing to do this Saturday, tonight, later on, we're going to get that fight. And it's a very, very good fight. So be sure to check that fight out. That's going to be on Showtime. It's not a pay-per-view. It's between two undefeated fighters. Check out the fight. Support the fight. It's a very, very good fight. Fights that we normally don't get between two undefeated prospects. Not even prospects at this point. They're contenders. But these two are putting it all on the line to fight tonight. This is a good scrap. This is not the scraps we normally get, but we're getting it. You know, most of these guys play it safe, but this is a good scrap later on tonight, so be sure to check it out. Now, going back down to his breakdown, let's talk a little bit about Hector Garcia for the ones that's unfamiliar with him, okay? He's an undefeated fighter. He's 16. He has 16 wins, 10 by knockouts, no draws, no losses or anything like that. All right, he's 31 years old. He's about 5'8", 5'9" height, I believe. All right, he's 67-inch reach. Like I said, he's been a featherweight for most of his career. Moved up 130, fought some of the best fighters. He fought Isaac Avalar. He fought Chris Colbert, who was undefeated, beat him. All right, and then he went on to win a title against Roger Gutierrez and becoming the WBA super champion. All right, the full champion. All right, Dominican fighter, really good fighter, southpaw on top of that. And he's going to be fighting Tank. We already know Tank. He's almost knocked out. He has one of the best KO ratios in the sport today. All right, Tank is coming off of wins against Rolly Romero. That was back in May, I believe. He had the wins against that. He had a Rolly win. Who else did he fight? He fought Isaac Cruz, went the distance with Cruz. Cruz was the second person in Tank's career that went the distance with Tank. He went the distance with Tank, and then who else he fought? He fought Leo Santa Cruz. He fought Mario Barrios at 140. So Tank has been up and down. He's fought as high as 140 and fought as low as 126, but he's been mainly fighting at 130 or 135 throughout most of his career. All right, but Tank, he's 28 years old, 27 wins, 25 by knockouts, no losses, no draws or anything like that. He's a beast. We already know he's short. He's like 5'5" and a half, 67-inch reach, and straight from Baltimore. All right, so let's get it in. Let's talk about this fight. Now, this is a fight. I don't want to call it a tune-up because everybody's waiting for the Ryan Garcia fight, and they agreed, and I mean Tank and Ryan Garcia agreed that they will face each other probably somewhere around April. Okay? In the meantime, Tank took this fight with Hector Garcia. Excuse me. He took this fight with Hector Garcia before the Ryan fight, right? Now, this is a good clash, but I don't want people to get it twisted. Hector Garcia is not a tune-up. He's undefeated. He's a champion, and he fought and beat Chris Colbert, who was undefeated, who is a guy that's on Showtime, right? And that some of us kind of wanted to see the Tank fight, especially because Tank was at 130. Chris Colbert was one of the names, one of the up-and-coming guys that people wanted to see. His name was thrown around in there as far as fighting Tank. You know, he was a ranked fighter at the time. No, he wasn't a champion, but Chris Colbert ain't no slouch. And Hector Garcia pretty much dropped him and dominated him for the majority of that fight. All right, so Hector's no slouch. And now, even though he's coming from 130, he's moving up. I understand. But it's not like he's a small guy. We know Tank is very small. He's shorter than just about everybody he faces. And he's smaller overall. So Hector is not a small guy. Yes, he fights at the lower weights, but naturally he's a bigger man. He's taller than him, and he probably walks around at a higher weight than Tank. All right, he's just able to get himself down to 130. All right, but he's a southpaw. Like I said, they're both southpaws. All right, very experienced fighter from Dominican Republic, and good, crafty fundamentals is on point. Good fighter, right? Solid power, not a KO artist by any means, but solid power and very aggressive. Great stamina, great conditioning. You know what I'm saying? And he got his fundamentals is on point. He's a good counter puncher. He has a good jab. He has solid hand speed. And up to this point, he seemed to be pretty durable for the most part. All right. And again, like I said, he's coming off of some really, really good wins. So, yes, I know he's a guy that's moving up in weight. And I know a lot of us just can't wait to see the Ryan Garcia fight. And I get that. But don't sleep. Hector Garcia is not a tune-up. I think a lot of people probably slept on him, including myself, just because we thought he was going to, we thought he was just a guy that was fighting Chris Colbert. And many of us wasn't really familiar. I know I wasn't familiar with him in that fight. You know what I'm saying? Now, if I probably did some film study, I would have checked him out. But leading up to that fight, wasn't really familiar with the dude. And, Chris Colbert, I'm very familiar with him. I've been watching him for a really long time. So he was able to, pick up that win. But he's fighting Tank Davis, and Tank is a guy that's fought a lot of good fighters. I listed some of them earlier in this video. All right, but it's been a really, really long time since I seen Tank fight an actual southpaw. All right, it's been a while. And all of those names I named earlier are more his recent fights where none of them has been any southpaws. It hasn't been a southpaw in the ring with Tank in a long time. The last time, I believe it was like Liam Walsh or Jesus Cuellar, and even Pedraza, all right, which is one of his biggest wins, or his first really big win, his first title win in his career. All right, and so those guys were southpaws. I mean, Pedraza switches, but for the most part of that fight, he was fighting as a southpaw. All right, and I went back and did film study on that. I didn't watch the Liam Walsh fight. I'm saying his name right. I know it's Liam. Not sure if it's Walsh. I always get Liam. Yeah, it is Liam Walsh, so I apologize. I didn't go back and watch it. I didn't bother because I already remember how that fight went. Walsh didn't really bring anything to the table for Tank. And Tank, it was this UK fight. Went out there and fought him and dominated him. But I did go back and watch the Cuellar fight, and I also watched the Pedraza fight. All right, and the Cuellar fight is probably one of his most dominant performances. Going back, and to be honest, going back and watching Tank fight southpaws after not seeing him fight southpaws in such a long time was really refreshing, because I realized that Tank fight better against southpaws. I really believe from doing this film study, I know a lot of us haven't, or a lot of us, including myself, felt like he hasn't really progressed. Like he showed his greatness early. I think Cuellar was back in 2018. He showed us his talent early, and he struggled in certain fights. Like he struggled a little bit in the Gamboa fight when we didn't feel like he should have. He struggled a little bit in the Cruz fight. Cruz gave him a good fight. And he struggled in the Barrios fight and the Isaac Cruz fight, and even in the Rolly Romero fight. So he struggled a little bit, but he was still able to knock just about all of these guys out except Isaac Cruz. But when I go back and watch Tank, and from watching him fight southpaws, I honestly believe Tank is better at fighting southpaws. You know what I'm saying? I think you see a lot more of his game when he's fighting another southpaw. I think the way his defensive skills, the way you see him slip a jab, he does it much better. And it's not about dominating the foot positioning, that lead foot, dominance. It's none of that. You know what I'm saying? You're fighting another fighter. It's like two orthodox fighters fighting each other. Whereas Tank seems to be, you would think he's just more familiar with fighting southpaws, because all he's doing is slipping jabs and countering and using all of the angles that he has in his arsenal. So as I'm watching the Cuellar fight, and I'm also watching the Pedraza fight, and then I go back and watch some of the Isaac Cruz fight or some of the Rolly Romero fight, I realize that Tank is a better fighter fighting against southpaws. You know, and I think that offensively and defensively, you know. So as I'm watching the Cuellar fight, the key thing that I noticed with Tank is that, you know, his ability just to keep his head off the line and slip and counter and bring out all of these angles. Sometimes he'll slip and then, you know, he'll slip and then counter with an uppercut, or counter with an uppercut with a right to the body. You know what I'm saying? It's just so many different angles he can use. Every time he throws the punch, it seems like he's throwing a different punch, you know? And when I watched Hector Garcia, and I did film study of him, of course. Now, the Chris Colbert fight wasn't available, unfortunately, right? For whatever reason, the Roger Gutierrez and the Chris Colbert fights, you just couldn't find them. It's not on the Showtime app. It's not on YouTube or anything like that. I just couldn't find the full fights. I found a couple of highlight videos. But when you watch the Isaac Avelar fight with Hector Garcia, Hector is a southpaw, and Isaac Avelar is also a southpaw, and it's a more recent fight. That fight was early or late in 2021, so it was about a year ago, right? Avelar was able to drop Garcia in the very first round, right? And Avelar is a southpaw. Now, even though I feel that Garcia woke up after that, you know, because he did much better after that first round, you know, he, for the most part, he pushed strong to the end, right? But what I noticed with Hector Garcia is that his head is kind of right dead center, you know? He uses his legs a lot for his defense. You know, he does have that Philly shell. He does roll some punches, you know, and counter with short right hands, you know, and pull counters. He can do that. He can definitely counter, but his head is mainly in the center, you know, and sometimes he goes into these exchanges where he's just too squared. And, you know, I know people feel like because he's not a tune-up, like myself, he's not a tune-up, but stylistically, he's an easier fight to me than an Isaac Cruz was, you know, or who's the other guy that Tank for, or Mario Barrios. You know, Mario Barrios was really good at controlling distance, using his jab, staying out of range, you know, so it made it a little harder for Tank to, you know, slip the jab and counter, because Barrios was so much taller and longer, you know what I'm saying? And he was just better at controlling range. But I can't really say the same for Hector Garcia. He's decent when it comes to that. But when you're fighting a puncher like Tank, who I believe is better against southpaws, and the thing with Hector, great stamina, you know, a great worker. You know, he throws a lot of punches. He's good at coming forward. I mean, he could fight on the back foot, but he's good mainly at coming forward. What happens is when you fight a guy like Tank, who's going to be slipping your jab and countering and using these angles, it's going to make you fall back and have to, you know, you're going to be forced to fight going backwards. You know, and even if you change it up, you can't. How many counters are you gonna be able to take, especially when your head is right there in the center to get hit? You know, Tank is just gonna be slipping to his right, slipping to his left, countering to the body. You know, hitting you with uppercuts, hitting you with punches from all different kind of angles, and throwing combinations on top of that. and go into your body. Even if you change it up and fight out of a high guard, then he's going to really open you up. You know, we saw that in the Jose Pedraza fight, another fight where Tank was dominant, not as dominant as in the Cuellar fight, because Pedraza, you know, he's just a little bit more technically sound, and he's a lot more athletic. You know, he's a guy that's fighting in a high guard, but he's shifting his body left to right. He's constantly moving his head. You know, he's timing the jabs a little bit better. You know, he's not being as predictable because he's doing a lot of probing, and, you know, he's just doing more than Cuellar was. Now, I expect more from Hector as well. You know, I expect Hector to probe a little bit, to feint a little bit, to change levels a little bit. So I expect him to do more than Cuellar. But I'm not expecting him to do much more than Pedraza. You know, there's a difference. And even though I respect Hector and I think he's a good fighter, I think his main punch really is to land a straight left hand. And that's cool, you know. He's good. He's going to time it. He's going to catch Tanks with some good shots, just like Rolly Romero did with the right hand. He's going to catch Tank and time Tank, because Tank is a good defender, a solid defender, but he's not great at defending. You know, sometimes he do take a lot of jabs. Sometimes he do kind of walk into some certain shots, but he's a very durable fighter that has a lot of power, and he's willing to take some hits in order to give them. And most of these guys can't go punch to punch with Tank, no matter how much bigger they are. We saw that in the Rolly Romero fight. You know what I'm saying? Tank just really know what he's doing, you know. And I think with Hector Garcia, he's just too easy to hit, you know. And Tank is just go back and watch those fights. Tank is just too good at fighting southpaws. You know, you're gonna see a lot more defense than you've seen in the Leo Santa Cruz fight, where Leo just kept landing at will. Another thing with Tank, and you've seen this with the Leo fight, and we've seen this with the Rolly Romero fight. You can't keep throwing the same punch continuously. So if you're throwing a right hand, if you're in the corner, don't throw the right hand more than once. If you throw it and you missed it, reset, move, do something else. Do not continuously throw the right hand with him. We saw what happened to Leo Santa Cruz. Cruz threw it 3 times. 3 times. While in the same corner, the same punch. He paid. He paid for it. You know what I'm saying? Sorry about the sound. He paid for it, and he was knocked out cold, and he was down for a minute. Same thing with Rolly Romero. Rolly was on the ropes. He threw a right hand, miss, fell back, stepped back, threw it again, and then Tank ended up slipping it and landing a big left hand and put him to sleep. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, Rolly wasn't in the corner. Tank was in the corner, but Tank was trapping him. He was setting up the trap. Rolly threw the right hand, missed, but threw it again, came forward, threw it again, and that's when Tank slipped and countered him with a left hand. And it didn't put him to sleep, but Rolly got up, and then you can tell that not until he got back to his dressing room, he didn't know what the hell was going on. He was out on his feet. You get what I'm saying? Like, he got back up, but he was clearly out. So Hector, that's another thing he has to be careful about, especially if he's going to be exchanging with Tank, who's more durable, who's been proven to be more durable, and he's probably the bigger puncher as well. You go into these exchanges and you're squared up with Tank like he was in the Avalar fight in the first round. If you're gonna square up with Tank and you're gonna keep that left or that right hand up or that left hand up or whatever, if you're gonna be holding the phone, keep it tight, man. Don't be lazy with it, because that's exactly how he got caught in the first round against Avalar. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, too many flaws with Hector Garcia. Yes, he is a good fighter. No, this is not a tune-up. This is a legit fight. But, you know, at 135, he's not proven. And being a southpaw, I think that's a disadvantage more than an actual advantage going against Tank. You know, and the fact that he doesn't really move his head, doesn't really keep it off the line. I just think that's going to cause problems for him. And I expect Tank to actually hurt him and knock him out at some point. You know, I would have liked to go and watch the Chris Colbert fight because I know Chris Colbert is a type to switch. You know, I don't think he was fighting the majority of that fight. I think for the majority of the time, he is a orthodox fighter. But he does go into a southpaw every now and then. Maybe Hector has improved in some of those flaws that he's had in previous fights. But against Tank, I don't know. I just think that Tank is just too good against southpaws. And I think out of a certain amount of punches, he's going to catch Hector and put him away and stop him. You know? But it's not a bad fight. It's not a bad fight. I actually like this fight better than the Rolly Romero fight. You know, it's not a bad fight at all. But Hector is just, he just doesn't got it for me. He doesn't have it for me against Tank Davis. Tank is just too strong, too powerful, and he's just gonna be too slick against another southpaw. You know, I think that's what he does. That's what he's great at. Be sure to check him out though. I think Hector has a chance of possibly outworking Tank, but then I think once he gets counter a good amount of times, you know, I think he's going to slow down the pace or even pick up the pace. And if he picks up the pace and start being more aggressive, then he's going to get knocked out even sooner, you know, because Tank is just going to make him walk into something. So I think either way, whether it's a slow pace fight, you know, you don't want Tank hunting you down either, you know, because if he's hunting you down, he might be getting hit a lot more, but he's gonna go to your body. He's gonna wear you down, you know. So I think Tank wins this by stoppage. Not sure which round yet, you know. I think Tank could. I don't know if Tank wants to get the rounds in or whatever, you know, because he is gonna be fighting Ryan if he is gonna win this fight. But I expect Tank to dominate in this fight and score a knockout. Probably like within 7 or 8 rounds, you know. So anyway, that's my review, or that's my breakdown of the fight. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. All right, smash that like button as well, and share the video if you could. You know, follow me on all social media platforms. Boxingwave 10. Hit me on Twitter. Hit me on Instagram. And I'll see you on the next one, man. I'm out of here. Peace.